Welcome back to the thrilling crime-solving journey of Xu Qi'an in the Nightwatcher, Chapter 43. The Proclamation. In that moment, a librarian from the Yunlu Library was appointed as the chief minister of the inner cabinet. This individual, breaking from the conservative traditions upheld by his predecessors, aligned himself with the Ren sect, enduring a barrage of public scorn for his choices. The chaotic power struggle over the foundation of the nation finally reached its conclusion. As a result, the Yunlu Library became a target of the Ren sect's ire. The Ren sect quickly came to view the library's existence as a threat to the emperor's reign. It was also at this time that Cheng Wei proposed plans to establish the Xu Qi'an, an academy aimed at cultivating talent for the court. From this point onward, the Confucian teachings began to wane. This was the origin of the rivalry between the Yunlu Library and the Xu Qi'an in their quest for dominance in Confucian thought. The Xu Qi'an, being a state-run institution, was inherently superior to the privately funded Yunlu Library. Xu Qi'an awakened to these realizations. After Xu Tan finished recounting the history, he turned to Xu Qi'an with a probing tone. "Brother, what do you think? I'm talking about the political struggle, not the academia. You're afraid to engage in scholarly discussion, are you, farmer boy?" Xu Qi'an scoffed internally, but maintained a smile. What appears to be a struggle for the foundational legitimacy of the state is, at its core, a fight for power. Those who read and aspire to enact their desires must seize authority. Meanwhile, the number of people wielding state power is finite. The greater your authority, the more power others lose. The highest realm of power struggle is that of reducing the emperor to a mere figurehead. Xu Tan, who had only casually posed the question, turned pale at Xu Qi'an's words. Xu Qi'an shot him a sideways glance. "What? Have I spoken incorrectly?" "That's correct, though such words shouldn't be uttered freely." Xu Tan inhaled deeply. "Continue." Xu Qi'an nodded knowingly. No matter how formidable the Confucian techniques may be, they pale in comparison to imperial authority. Mastering literary and martial skills only serves to support the emperor. This single statement is all the proof you need. Historically, whether they were corrupt officials or wise ministers, all who held real power met grim endings. Controlling the court is temporary. Ultimately, those in power will be dealt with, for ministers will always remain ministers, he continued thoughtfully. Xu Qi'an had seen countless dethroned rulers through history, but how many powerful ministers had enjoyed a favorable fate? Excluding Cao Man during his fall into chaos. The rest faced dire consequences. Xu Tan quickly inquired, "Is there any way to break this cycle?" "The academy doesn't teach such matters." "Very difficult." Xu Qi'an shook his head, clasping his hands in a formal salute. "The court is like a battlefield, where factions rejoice in their short-lived victories, only to watch their entire families reduced to ash." His words were peculiar, infused with the weight of ages long past. Xu Tan stared, captivated by the lingering essence of history in his brother's eyes. "But my brother is having an insight." Xu Qi'an's tone shifted. "Speak, brother." The story of the Confucian Da Now serves as a potent example. When you can wield influence over the fate of a nation, you transition from a scholar reliant on imperial power to a formidable force, equal to the monarchy. Xu Tan's eyes lit up, joy washing over him, only to be met with Xu Qi'an's lazy compliment. "Erlang, you are quite the clever one. Truly a teachable child." At this point, Xu Tan remembered he had meant to ask about his brother's perspective on the subject. Xu Qi'an fell silent, contemplating a personal uncertainty. While the road to bureaucratic power from the Yunlu Library appeared blocked, it still remained a sacred ground for Confucian cultivation. It was only the route to officialdom that had been severed. Xu Tian was unclear whether the waning influence was in the bureaucracy or in the Confucian system itself. Yet, to Xu Qi'an, it seemed undoubtedly the latter. Reflecting on their conversation by the waterfall, Xu Tian had noted that for the past 200 years, the pinnacle of Confucian mastery had merely reached the third rank. Was it because attaining that level necessitated a role in court? Or was it linked to something that dictated the fate of the Confucian tradition? What about that stone tablet over there? Why is it placed here? Xu Qi'an asked. Xu Tian regarded the tablet, his gaze heavy with complexity as he bowed. This is part of the aftermath of the power struggle for Confucian orthodoxy. The illustrious Cheng Sheng, upon founding the Guojijian, recognized that to surpass the Yunlu library, he needed a distinct educational system. Without it, the Guojijian students would merely be considered disciples of the Yunlu library. Thus, he devoted himself to the in-depth study of the teachings of the ancient sages while incorporating his own philosophy. Ultimately, after 13 years, he succeeded in creating a superior educational system, one where the students excelled beyond their teachers. With the philosophy of preserving the principles of heaven, eradicating human desires, Xu Qi'an was taken aback. Xu Tian nodded. Having gone through recent events, he was now willing to discuss academic matters with his brother. Cheng Sheng believed that everything in the world follows an inherent principle, which he called Li. Li is the deepest essence of all that exists, the most authentic reality. All things exist in relation to Li, allowing for natural development. However, humans, during the chaotic interactions of all beings, can easily lose sight of their true selves and direction. And thus, one must preserve the principles of heaven and eradicate human desires. Xu Qi'an elaborated, intrigued by the concept. This principle was the foundation of the Guojijian's ideology, but the specifics remained to be explained by Xu Tian. Xu Tian continued, Cheng Sheng, a scholar of the ancient sages, established this framework. Those who adhere to it will surely not go astray, achieving accuracy and harmony within the laws of heaven and earth. This framework elevates concepts of loyalty, filial piety, propriety, and righteousness to the level of universal principles. Xu Tian chuckled lightly. When a ruler demands the death of a subject, the subject must comply. When a father demands the death of a son, the son must agree. Sacrificing oneself for righteousness, or for the sake of propriety, are ideals one must uphold. Xu Qi'an listened in silence, suddenly posing a question. What would Su Ju think? Is this right or wrong? Xu Tian froze, staring blankly at his brother, opening his mouth to reply but finding himself abruptly stifled by an inexplicable force that rendered him speechless. Xu Qi'an immediately recognized it as the shackling of thoughts. And that's why this tablet exists. Xu Qi'an shifted his attention back to the stone inscription. Yes, Xu Tian affirmed. The conflict between the Yunlu library and the Guojijian reflects battles over academic superiority and ideological dominance. This tablet has stood tall in the Sheng Academy for 200 years. Unyielding. As long as it stands, the Yunlu library will never surpass the Guojijian. The president, after decades in the academy, is gray-haired, striving to counter the inscription's claims and establish a more precise understanding. Yet he has failed. Because it represents truth, it embodies precision, Xu Qi'an concluded. Precisely, Xu Tian acknowledged, bowing again. Not just the president. In fact, eminent Confucians from various eras have tried in vain to dispute the ideas presented by this inscription. However, none have succeeded. How could an ordinary individual challenge the philosophy of a Sheng? And what about that empty tablet over there? Within, Xu Qi'an had formed a conjecture. It was meant for the president to fill. But for more than a decade, He hasn't written a single character. Xu Qi'an gestured toward the table beside the empty tablet. Over the years, students and esteemed scholars have attempted to inscribe their thoughts upon it, hoping to contest Sheng's words. Yet by the next morning, all their writings had been scrubbed away. However, their brushes and ink were always left behind, perhaps because the president still holds hope. Consequently, whenever students feel inspired or exceptional, they rush here to leave their mark. Alas, the person the president yearned for has yet to appear. I once thought I could leave my mark too. But his words trailed off, clearly unwilling to recount his youthful arrogance to his elder brother, fearing further embarrassment. Upholding righteousness requires sacrifice. Legacy endures through the ages. Xu Qi'an stared at the stone tablet, silent for a moment. Then he spoke solemnly. Suju, let me ask you, what holds greater weight, the ruler or the will of the people? Without hesitation, Xu Qi'an replied, certainly, the will of the people. Then why do you study? Xu Qi'an pressed. Xu Qi'an instinctively replied, to serve the nation with loyalty. Upon uttering those words, he froze in realization. Xu Qi'an moved on, continuing to probe, is leaving your name in history truly the ultimate pursuit for scholars? Xu Qi'an remained silent, his unspoken thoughts saying everything. The actions of the great scholars of the Yunlu Library, living off the scholarly works of others, spoke volumes. Xu Qi'an clasped his hands in a formal gesture. When the ruler wishes for the death of his subject, the subject has no choice but to comply. On what basis does this stand? When a father demands the death of his son, the son must obey. On what grounds? Is this society so devoid of humanity that it offers no rights to its people? Xu Qi'an laughed softly. I may not be a scholar, but I still wish to inscribe a few words. Su Ju, prepare the ink for me. Xu Qi'an frowned. It's clearly here for someone to write, Xu Qi'an replied. If my writing is poor, tomorrow, it will be erased anyway. Upon hearing this, Xu Qi'an set to grinding the ink. Shortly after, he held the brush before the empty tablet, asking, what do you want to write, brother? This time, I want to write it myself. Xu Qi'an lowered his head, taking the brush, directing it toward the empty stone. An image of the breakfast vendor from earlier flashed in his mind. Clearly distressed but refusing to accept his coin. A figure of pity, akin to a dog. The rampant corruption among the officials of the Great Feng dynasty had persisted for ages. All of them like beasts in human skin, declaring loyalty and patriotism while turning a blind eye to the suffering of the lower class. He recalled the arrogant Xu Zuli, carefree as he galloped along the streets, unconcerned about potential repercussions. The imbalance of extraordinary power made the misdeeds of the feudal dynasty starkly apparent, leaving the lowest of the populace with little courage to rise and reveal the truth. In his past life, he had at least read accounts of bold peasant uprisings. Yet in this world, such chances were non-existent, and anyone daring to rise up would be swiftly crushed. Xu Qi'an inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly, lifting the brush to write. For the heavens, I establish my heart. For the people, I forge my fate. To inherit the wisdom of the sages. To usher in an era of peace for all. With those strokes complete, Xu Qi'an felt an exhilarating freedom, expelling the pent-up frustrations and tossing the brush aside. He declared loudly, Su Ju, this is what scholars ought to do. Crack. A jolt shot through Xu Suju's mind, like a bolt of lightning tearing through confusion, breaking the chains binding his soul. He stared blankly at his brother, unsure if it was an illusion, but it seemed that a deep violet aura flickered above Xu Qi'an's head, only to vanish moments later. Crack. The tablet beside them suddenly emitted a sharp cracking sound. A fissure appeared, stretching from the top to the bottom. The two brothers were struck with alarm, and before they could respond, the Xianxia Academy trembled violently, dust raining from the ceiling. A surge of pure energy erupted from the Xianxia Academy, tearing apart the white clouds overhead, a phenomenon visible from miles away. Xu Qi'an, bewildered, looked ashen. What just happened? It seems, we've stirred something ominous. What ominous thing? What have we stirred? Xu Tianyan exclaimed, panic rising in his voice. This has nothing to do with us. We've never even been to the Xianxia Academy. With that, he dashed toward the door, bolting for safety. Wait for me, scholar! Xu Qi'an shouted, chasing after him, mentally acknowledging that, in critical moments, it was often the scholars who displayed the most agile solutions. Chapter 44. Vanishing into thin air. The two brothers darted out of the Sacred Saint Academy, avoiding the main path and slipping into a narrow side street that led into the forest. They ran for quite some time before finally stopping. Xu Qi'an was still catching his breath normally, while Xu Tianyan, leaning against a sturdy pine tree, panted heavily, his fair complexion flushed from the exertion. What do we do now? Xu Qi'an asked his younger brother, who always preferred a more structured approach. Does that count as me helping the academy solve a difficult problem just now? He hadn't anticipated that his comments would trigger such a frightening phenomenon, and he had no idea what to expect next. So he had bolted after Xu Erlang, who was already moving ahead. Still struggling to regain his breath, Xu Tianyan let out a proud, aha. It was just a problem that had stumped scholars for 2 centuries. Xu Qi'an handed him a water pouch. Taking it gratefully, Xu Tianyan drank deeply. Back when we first entered the academy, I should have suggested you wait there, so the teachers and students could show their appreciation. But right now, I just want to get you out of here, he replied, tossing the water pouch back and pausing, noting that his older brother still seemed calm, without any questions or concerns. This combination of disappointment and admiration swirled within him. He admired Xu Qi'an for his intelligence, which put him far above their father's crude understanding. Xu Tianyan always felt a wave of pride at that thought. Yet, he also felt a flicker of disappointment he wouldn't have the chance to demonstrate his own brilliance to his brother, to make Xu Qi'an feel superior by comparison. Of course, even though you've composed awe-inspiring poetry on multiple occasions, or just penned a line that could shake a mountain, Xu Tianyan mused, I still believe I'm the smarter one. Without this belief, how could he embody the conviction that heaven did not give birth to me? Xu Tianyan. The great phoenix has been around since ancient times. The two brothers quickly maneuvered through the trees, quietly making their way to the stables. At this moment, fleeing without a trace was the best option. If Xu Qi'an stayed behind, he would likely be met with gratitude, even reverence, as the academy's newfound great sage. Though, of course, that scenario seemed unlikely. This was one aspect of the situation that was positive. The downside was also quite clear. The Van Locke Academy was in a rivalry with the National Academy, and Xu Qi'an's gratitude toward Van Locke would mean he would be hated by the scholars of the National Academy. All of the nobles in court belonged to the National Academy. A single tax evasion case was liable to cause catastrophic repercussions, but what they faced was more dangerous than tax issues by 100-fold. It was a nested peril. Strangely enough, Xu Qi'an's thoughts aligned perfectly with his own. Xu Qi'an, you truly are something else, Xu Tianyan mused. He appreciated the fact that Xu Erlang wasn't some narrow-minded scholar. Perhaps this was why he had taken to reading military strategy. Simple-minded. Xu Tianyan shot back with a smirk. As long as we leave, I'm sure the academy will keep this under wraps. He didn't say anything more, focusing on running while contemplating the gravity of their situation. Outside the Sacred Saint Academy, an open field lay ahead. Suddenly, the head scholar, Zhao Shou, made a surprising move. He turned to face the back of the academy, a serious expression crossing his face. Moments later, 3 esteemed scholars followed suit, their faces taut with concern as they looked in the same direction. The crown princess, feeling perplexed, instinctively turned her gaze that way as well. The sky was clear. Nothing was visible. But just a moment later, a visible surge of spiritual energy shot up into the sky, piercing through the azure clouds before hovering amidst the thick white vapor of Mount Qingyun, slowly dissipating under the intense scrutiny of onlookers. Zhao Shou vanished first, and the 3 esteemed scholars promptly employed their mystical techniques to shift behind the academy. The crown princess furrowed her brow, quickly gathering her skirts as she hurried after them. Her tall figure moved with a grace that made her seem ethereal, like a delicate blossom unfolding in the spring breeze. Within the Sacred Saint Academy, a flickering candle cast dancing shadows, and melted wax flowed like streams. In the vast emptiness of the hall, an air of spiritual energy stirred, highlighting the figure of Zhao Shou. He swiftly scanned the hall, his gaze settling on a cracked stone tablet emblazoned with the insignia of the sacred saint lineage. In that moment, a storm brewed behind his usually calm eyes as he deduced the reason for the overwhelming spiritual surge. The seal that constrained the academy had fractured, releasing the righteous energy of the Van Locke Academy and creating the strange phenomenon just witnessed. The question loomed: why had the sacred saint tablet shattered? Zhao Shou quickly identified the cause. His gaze locked onto the stony surface, and the contents carved into it seemed to blur reality until nothing else mattered. Only the jagged words etched so harshly into his mind, deeply engraved into his heart. The outlines of the 3 esteemed scholars appeared within the tumultuous energy, swirling like petals caught in a windstorm, instinctively sweeping their gazes around the vast hall. As they noticed the cracked sacred saint tablet, their pupils contracted involuntarily. How could it shatter so suddenly? No, this might be fortuitous. It signified that the destiny-sealing barrier of the Van Locke Academy had been destabilized. Zhang Shun pondered this, soon picking up on Zhao Shou's unusual state. His demeanor seemed distant, lost in a realm of his own thoughts. The tablet had cracked unexpectedly, during a time when a sacred saint was not present, indicating someone had shaken the very foundation of the stone. Zhang Shun and Chen Tai exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting shock and uncertainty. They too noticed the strangeness in Zhao Shou, mirroring Li Mo Bak's realization. Uphold the will of heaven and earth, establish fate for the people, pass on the sacred teachings, and bring peace to the ages. Zhang Shun murmured. He was overwhelmed by the drive and aspirations embedded in those words. Goosebumps prickling down his arms. His fervor surged within him. This is what a scholar should strive for. Chen Tai stuttered with fervent excitement. To serve the people and the state. To care for the world, rather than merely for themselves or a select few. The decorated scholar trembled, his voice ragged. In solidarity, we must pursue excellence. Li Mo Bak inhaled deeply, attempting to steady himself. Who penned these words? The 3 turned their gazes toward Zhao Shou, the hermit of decades past who had poured his life's work into countering the doctrines of the sacred saint lineage. If anyone could forge a new sect of scholarship, it would be him. Yet Zhao Shou had been with them just moments earlier, and his current demeanor spoke volumes. It wasn't him. Silenced, they waited until Zhao Shou finally broke the quiet, a long pause preceding his soft reply. You 3 should step outside for now. We'll discuss what we need later. He added, a wise man knows when to remain silent. The 3 esteemed scholars bowed and exited together, closing the door behind them. The hall fell into silence as Zhao Shou stood in contemplation before the tablet. framed by the translucent window, scattered sunlight casting ethereal patterns upon him. After what felt like an eternity, he adjusted his official garb, then bowed deeply to the stone tablet. To hear the truth in the morning is worth dying for by evening. Finally catching up, the crown princess arrived at the Sacred Saint Academy. She found a barrier of energy encircling the vicinity, trapping it like a bird in a cage. Remaining calm, she stood at the academy stairs, awaiting the three scholars, much like a flower silently unfurling in the breeze. The esteemed scholars emerged, their expressions grim, leaving uncertain tidings. "Gentlemen, may I inquire what has transpired?" she asked, gazing into the hall. "Your Highness, it's best if you refrain from asking us right now," Chen Tai replied respectfully. "We've not yet uncovered any leads." The crown princess smiled, her noble demeanor unwavering. Bidding farewell to the three scholars, she glided back towards her chamber, the mountain wind tousling her long dress, making her appear almost divine as she descended. Two cohorts of armored guards stood watch outside the chamber, statuesque and vigilant. The 24 golden-mantled guards were her elite protectors, while another 7, known as the Stonebreakers, awaited orders. Due to the Academy's disdain for the Wei clan, they were barred from entering the mountain. As the crown princess and her guards descended the mountain, they found the 7 Stonebreakers waiting along the road. She instructed, "Relay the news about the overwhelming spiritual energy of the Van Locke Academy and the Sacred Saint Academy being sealed. Tell Wei Gong to have someone monitor the academy for further investigation." "Understood." One of the Stonebreakers nodded respectfully. "Also, I need you to investigate a certain individual, the captain of Chanyang County. Xu Qi'an." Orders received. Chapter 45. The older brother is truly annoying. In the heart of the capital, nestled within the Quan Ting Pavilion, the 8 trigrams platform held an air of quiet elegance. The headmaster, clad in white robes with hair and beard like spun silver, sat contemplatively behind his desk, absently rubbing a wine cup as his gaze drifted toward the northwest. To his left lay a grand table bedecked with an array of delectable dishes. Seated at this table was Kai Wei, her egg-shaped face adorned with large, expressive eyes. Her delicate features exuded a sweetness that hadn't yet been dulled by the weight of expectation. Between bites, she chattered away, "Master, when will I finally break into the 6th tier and become a proper alchemist?" The headmaster chuckled softly. "That day will come when you learn to focus on your cultivation and resist the temptation of food." Kai Wei pouted, her enthusiasm dimming. "Focus on cultivation? That's going to be a challenge for a lifetime." She swallowed her food and continued, "By the way, that counterfeit silver is so volatile. Toss it in water, and it explodes. There's no way it can be stored safely. How am I supposed to report back to the Emperor?" The headmaster's voice turned mild. "The Emperor is simply a glutton, content to laze about. Tell him to go away if he bothers you." Kai Wei stuck out her tongue playfully. "I wouldn't dare say that. You can do it if you want." The headmaster smiled gently. "Master, how can you stand by and let 4th brother act like this?" He just dashed out of the city, claiming he'd opened the door to mastering alchemical arts. Ellipsis. "Master, what does it mean to dissect a plant?" Kai Wei pressed. The headmaster sighed. "Kai Wei, what would you have me tell you? Is there anything I can eat to silence my endless chatter?" Ellipsis. A few moments passed. "Master, why do you keep staring off in that direction?" Kai Wei, there's a small part of me that regrets some decisions." "Regrets? What do you mean? Why haven't I learned any forbidden texts from the Confucian masters?" Kai Wei chuckled at her own cleverness, but her amusement faltered as she noticed the food on the table quickly decaying, emitting a foul odor. Her eyes widened in horror. And she whimpered, "Master, I was wrong. Please fix it." But the headmaster continued to gaze toward the distant northwest, laughing heartily. "Let me impart a lesson. In the field of alchemy, most transformations are irreversible." Gazing through tear-filled eyes, Kai Wei whimpered, "I'll never visit the old grouch again." Ellipsis. In a bamboo grove nearby, the head of the academy, Zhao Shou, spoke gravely, "Stay away from this area within 30 paces." With a wave of his robe, a surge of spiritual energy radiated out, creating a protective barrier around the pavilion. Once he completed the formation, he turned to 3 esteemed scholars. Li Mu Bai sipped his tea, his expression serious. "I've made inquiries." At that time, there were no students near the Saintly Learning Academy, so we don't know who entered. The writing on that stone tablet doesn't belong to any student in our library. Its poor quality suggests it was not produced by our academy's teachings. As he spoke, Li Mu Bai felt a twinge of unease. If it wasn't a student from their school who had written it and given the level of skill displayed, it had to be someone else. Knock, knock. Zhang Shen rapped his knuckles against the table, brushing off his casual demeanor. Signs and symbols can be forged. The uglier the writing, the more suspicious it seems. Then what's the purpose behind disguising the writing? Chen Tai interjected suddenly. The stone slab has stood there for decades, and every teacher and student has had their chance to examine it. Everyone wants to become a hero. It's not like they would care about disguising their handwriting. Besides, wasn't it just when Huo Kutu and Xu Ningyan were wandering the mountains? An uncomfortable silence hung in the air as the 3 esteemed scholars shared uneasy glances. Li Mu Bai took a sip of his tea and sighed. For the sake of heaven and earth, for the lives of the people, to carry forth the profound teachings of the sage, and to usher in an era of peace. He trailed off, his gaze filled with regret. I've neglected my ambitions in the wake of these thoughts. All I desire now is to leave my mark on history. Brother Chun Jane, you're truly admirable. Zhang Shen cheered, giving him a thumbs up. Then let me take the lead on the poem exhorting students to learn. Li Mu Bai's tone shifted. Serving the people and the state isn't at odds with making a name for myself. Zhao Shou raised an eyebrow at Li Mu Bai, a flicker of light igniting in his eyes. Are you about to enter the stage of life determination? A sudden shock rippled through the room. Li Mu Bai smiled and stroked his beard. A moment of enlightenment, a moment of clarity. The other 2 scholars couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. It was only after Zhao Shou's words that they noticed the subtle shift in Li Mu Bai's aura. The 3rd-tier life determination stage was the pinnacle to which many aspired. Some studied for fame, others for fortune, some in hope of blessings in the afterlife. Each pursued their own path. Zhao Shou sought to establish a new lineage of Confucianism to free countless scholars from the shackles of dogma. As long as he hadn't achieved this goal, he wouldn't be able to move past the 2nd-tier stage. No one dared to ask Li Mu Bai about his life goals. In that moment, he too felt unclear, lost in thought. Zhang Shen and Chen Tai exchanged knowing glances, silently deciding to retreat into seclusion from that day forth within the Saintly Learning Academy. Not setting foot outside. From this day forward, students are forbidden from entering the Saintly Learning Academy. Zhao Shou's eyes shimmered with purpose as he regarded Li Mu Bai and Zhang Shen. This must remain confidential. I need the 3 of you to pledge your silence. The scholars looked at each other, stroking their chins thoughtfully. Zhao Shou channeled energy into his dantian, focusing his power into his tongue. A gentleman must speak with caution. Ellipsis. The 2 horses moved swiftly as they approached the capital, the brothers slowing their pace to a steady trot. The horses they'd rented weren't the fastest. Slightly better than a leisurely walk but lacking the stamina for long rides. If these beasts collapsed, They'd owe a hefty price of over 10 taels of silver. Given their empty pockets, that was prohibitive. Xu Qi'an let out a frustrated breath, finally voicing his concern. Shouldn't older brother explain himself? He was referring to those shocking statements earlier. What would you have me clarify? Xu Qi'an retorted. Older brother can barely read the basics. How could you conjure such earth-shattering words? Xu Qi'an huffed, defiance in his posture. Those are words meant for scholars alone. Look at you, strutting around like you're superior, as if simply being well-read made you elite. Whatever, I've had 9 years of mandatory schooling and even graduated from the police academy. I have years of hands-on experience typing on a keyboard, thanks to the digital age. I know a bit about everything. If it came down to a contest of knowledge, you scholars would be nothing but my little brothers. Xu Qi'an felt a twinge of frustration building inside. He pondered for a moment, then amended his approach. Kutu, you must realize that the Confucian thoughts of our day have their flaws. When I asked you about the role of scholars, you only gave me textbook answers. His words sent Xu Qi'an into deep reflection. This is the limitation of ideological conditioning. You scholars are so molded by your education that, over time, you begin to resemble it. Even when you consciously acknowledge its problems, you dare not challenge it. Xu Qi'an spoke slowly. We could use another term to describe this: the shackling of thought. The shackling of thought, Xu Kutu repeated to himself. The head librarian of Yunlu is also shackled by thought, influenced by the doctrines of the Cheng clan. He wants to break free, to forge a new pathway, but if he remains ensnared himself, how can he lead others out of it? Only those free from the whirlpool can do so. Perhaps it is precisely because my older brother hasn't read extensively that he can spot these issues. Think outside the box, and not confine himself within the limitations of Cheng thought. Of course, I too am shackled by the ideologies of the 21st century but have yet to find a way to break free. Xu Qi'an mused. The shackle of thought is, simply put, a worldview. Worldviews are shaped by the era we live in. In this age, educated by its standards, we don't see the issues unless we reach a certain level of knowledge, which leads to transformation and realization. Xu Kutu remained silent for a long time. He began retracing his thoughts back to their origins. After a fleeting moment, he looked up at Xu Qi'an, his eyes brightening. Your words have shown me clarity. Older brother, you're truly something else. Such insight. Xu Qi'an nodded internally, keeping his outward composure. He feigned a smirk. Too bad you didn't inherit the good genes of the Xu family. You only got the genes of the Li family. Older brother is such a pain. Xu Kutu didn't want to speak with him any further. If their mother caught wind of this, she'd surely slam the table in anger, exclaiming, "That damned brat is surely a bad omen for me."
Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter.